So right from the bottom of Saint Sophie, welcome to the webinar on the discourse of the soul. You know, what's really powerful is that within 2 paragraphs, Jesus gave us so much information about the soul. And just before we go into a short moment of silence and some individual and collective worship, and I'm going to do a little moment of gratitude. And if there's any of you that is moved to do one as well, I know I did that in the last webinar, and it took more than half of the webinar. So people were grateful. So what can I do? But we're going to do maybe 5 or 10 minutes like that. And then I'm going to present to you a few things. As we know, this is a revelation. This is a morantial food for our soul. And who am I to think I've understood what it is? But at least I can share with you my experiential understanding of what is Jesus addressing when he's when he's doing that discourse on the soul, and when he's with Nicodemus, and explain to that old man that he needs to be born again, and he's really puzzled because does it mean I need to go back in the womb of my mother? It might look like a stupid question, but it's not. It was really puzzling for him to hear this new element that he never heard before. And how many of these elements are we reading for the first time in our life when we read the Revelation? And I think there's an advice for all of us, is when we read something new, is not to interpret it with the old. And we have all the tendency to fit the new wine into old skin. So we need to be renewed in order to receive these truths in the right way. So just before, let's go into a moment of silence, and we'll do a little worship, and then we'll do a moment of gratitude. And if any of you want to do a short moment, I know Gretchen loves to do that, but she can pray for 15 minutes straight. She has the Guinness World Record, and today we won't try to beat that, so, because we have other things to do. Okay, let's go in silence for a minute. Well, thank you, Father. Thank you for all the blessing you have bestowed on us, and that you're still giving to us each day. Thank you for the gift of life, and even more for the gift of eternal life. What a blessing to live on a planet like ours, knowing that we're going to live eternally, and to know it's going to be different. But we need to start here, because this planet give us amazing opportunity for growth each day, for challenges, and to face them, knowing that we are guided by your divine presence to do your will and to do good in any situation we're involved. Thank you for leading us into a right speech and right action, whatever is the situation. And sometimes the right speech is not saying anything, but just be a sacred listener. Thank you for bringing us together on that amazing and incomparable teaching of the Master on the soul, and his interaction with Nicodemus on the soul. And in 2 paragraphs, we receive more than any of the New Age books that are out there to talk about the soul. And what a blessing to know that we have a soul, and that we're the mother of that soul, and it's up to us to nurture that soul. And what a blessing for us, man, to appreciate even more all the women, our mother, and all the women in our life, and understanding that we have so much to learn from them, because they have that naturally, that nurturing element. And we cannot escape it. We need to live that experience to truly be good mother for our own soul and for other souls that are coming to us. What a blessing to be able to unite in the union of our soul, where there's no argument or debate, but just appreciation of different point of view, so we can grow together and expand our very limited perspective of ascending mortal. I thank you, Rodin, for your teaching on that matter, and thank you, Master, for your teaching on explaining the power of a group, but a group that comes together and has that as a purpose and a willingness to work in coordinate harmony. Thank you for the spirit of truth of the Master that is always showing us the way to be daughter and son of God through living faith and being involved in unselfish service. What is your will, Father, is to serve other. It's that simple, and doing it in a loving manner. Thank you all for being here, and may this moment be a moment of enlightenment for all of us, and a place where we can recharge spiritually, morally, and so each of us can go our way in doing our Father's will and our Father's business. So be it. If one of you want to do a prayer, please go ahead.
So be it. I'm just grateful today, God, for all the people present. And what comes to mind after your sharing and your prayer, Guy, is how we can truly express ourselves, that Urantia expression of our souls, and the love that comes, the oneness we feel when we're in that soul space. So thank you, Father, for that ability to come from that place that's truly with you, Father, and to build our souls collectively today. And thank you, Jesus, for showing us and giving us all that to know how. So be it.
So be it.
Amen.
Une petite prière européenne, Agnès?
In English.
Sure.
Thank you, God, for the soul. The soul is that part of me who always wants to be at service and pushes me in service all the time. That's the way I nourish my soul, is by being at service, because when I'm at service, present to the others, you, through me, nourish them and nourish me. So thank you for this beautiful experience between you and your creation, between you and all of us here. Amen.
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 And we have our champion here, Bruce. Maybe you can do a last one, Bruce.
As we look to God within, help us to recognize the God within in each one of us. That when we do that, we truly become to know the nature of the union of souls. And in our union of souls, we come one as a part of a universe that is real and beyond this worldly plane. We thank you for the promise of that. How devastating it would be to see life as only that which we live on this planet. But our revelation has given us a glimpse of what is before us. And in that understanding, we truly have the potential to have a union of souls. And this we give in thanks to the Father and Mother, God of all. Amen.
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 Well, thank you all again for being here. And, we're going to have an interaction in the second part of the webinar. A few of you have been present in other webinar where I present the inner life, and it was more like a workshop, interactive right away. But yesterday, God being who He is, I was led to talk to you about many births that we go through in life. A couple of them we have nothing to do with it. It just happened. But the other one we need to be involved. So we're going to talk about that. But as an introduction, I'll share a little story that happened in 2000. I just finished studying for the first time the Urantia book, and we were a group in Toronto. I was living in Toronto at that time. It was about in the fall, and there's a big buy center in Toronto. And one of the students came and said, "Hey guys, there's a conference on the soul that is given by one of the top leader of the Baha'i movement, and we should all go." And I don't know, it was $5 or $10, whatever it was. And we said, okay. So there was maybe 10 of us that were part of that study group that decided to go together. It was on a Saturday night. So we found the place. I end up in an AA meeting, and I say, well, I think this is not the Discourse on the Soul. But finally, I found the room, and there was a lot of people. There were like 300 people in that room. And we wait, and we wait. So I say, it's good. Patience is one of the fruit of the Spirit. So finally, after maybe 45 minutes, I think it was planned to start at 8. So around 8:45, a guy came on stage and introduced himself. And he said, right there, I don't know anything about the soul, but I'm going to talk to you about the soul today. And the funny thing is, by the end of the night, everybody in the room was confused because he was right. He didn't know anything about the soul. It's too bad that he didn't encounter the incomparable teaching of the Urantia book. And I remember many times during the night, the people with me say, Guy, go on stage and talk. Tell him what it is. I said, no, it's not our night, it's their night. So when you see things like that, and basically what he was saying is that the soul reincarnate, how he didn't really know how, that there are old soul, young soul, and all these things that probably many of us have heard before we came to the revelation. But the revelation is very clear. The soul is the birth of the soul, as the Master explained in his discourse, happen when you make your first moral decision. And then it's the birth of the soul. That happen anywhere from 4 years old to 7, say on an average of 5 years, 11 months, and we know the rest of the story. Hopefully it's happening a little bit earlier now, but who knows? It doesn't matter. It depends on how the morality is built, because in that same paragraph, Jesus said that the soul is not built on self-consciousness. It's built on moral self-consciousness. So what does that mean? What is moral self-consciousness? What is self-consciousness? What is soul consciousness? So I think those are questions that probably all of us students of a revelation. Some people read the book and they're happy and they think it's a fantastic book and a fantastic read, and it's okay. But some of us want to have more than an idea of God. We want to know God, and we want to live God to the best of our abilities. And we learn pretty quickly that the limits that are there are self-imposed, because God is always willing to push back those limits. So through the last year, I've been working very closely with Agnès, hello Agnès. And we had we've been doing prison ministry together in Belgium. And we had many conversations on creation and co-creation. And during these conversations, Agnès always liked to bring this element of the womb and being pregnant. So I'm gonna invite her to talk a little bit. Is it too early for you, Agnès? You've been a teacher for 30 years, so you can do it. But I was fascinated by this element of always being pregnant finally. My mother had 7 kids and 2 miscarriages. So for 10 years or 12 years in a row, Lynn comes from a family of 8 children. We were, I don't know how many of you come from big family, but it seems our mother were always pregnant. So I think we're always pregnant, each of us. But are we willing? Are we accepting it? And are we nurturing that pregnancy? We're gonna fuse with our thought adjuster in the 5th dimension world. I wish that any of you want to fuse on this planet will do. I think that if it's offered to us, if we're at that level of understanding, we should stay. Would you delay it and I can stay a little bit longer to help that planet to get to a better place and leave it in a better state than when I enter into it? So this element of the womb and the pregnancy is very powerful. It's for women because it's so natural to you. But for us men, because it is not natural to us, but we can surely learn a lot from that. So I would invite Agnès to talk about that and to explain. Then we're going to go into explaining what would be the difference between a material womb, which is basically the womb of the mother that gives birth to a baby, a physical baby, and then we have a cosmic womb. And that cosmic womb is connected with the cosmic mind. And the mind is part of our humble mind is part of the cosmic mind, as we've learned. So this is really interesting that not only we're pregnant, we need to nurture the baby within. but at the same time, we can become midwife for others. We can really help others by nurturing their soul when God put them on our path. So that's what we're going to talk about today. You know, I'm going to share with you a few insight. You might like it, you might not agree with it. It doesn't matter, because the whole idea is not to agree or disagree, but it's to see that we have different point of view, and with those different point of view, we can expand our hours. So that's the only purpose. I don't claim that I have that I was inspired directly, and when I went to Israel in April, that I was touched in a matter that now I can preach to you, but I can share with you because you're my brothers and sister, and I'm really appreciative that we're all here together in that same Zoom room. Thank God for a good use, a wise use of technology together, and that we can sit here together. So Agnes, would you talk a little bit about this repeated analogy that you've done in the last year in our conversation?
Okay, well, for many years I've been always taking the pregnancy as an example, because I could live it like that. I'm a mother of 3 children. I lost a baby, but during a pregnancy, so 4 times pregnant. And what I remember about it, it's that, well, the good conditions of pregnancy is before being pregnant, a woman wants to be pregnant. And she chooses, well, her partner, because it's with that man that she wants to have babies. And so she gets ready to the idea. And not only to the idea, she starts to be careful of what she's going to eat, stop smoking or drinking or things that can affect the pregnancy. And so all these things, and getting ready one day or another to be pregnant without knowing exactly when it's going to happen. And when it's happening, well, she's not really aware that something is happening by the thought, but she can feel that something is moving in her. Well, that's my experience. I could feel that I was not exactly the same, that something strange was happening, that there was another reality that was probably taking place in my womb, and that I could not really, before going to the doctor, I couldn't certify that it was there, but there was something there. And so for the soul, I felt exactly the same. It is that in some situations, I felt that there was something else that was pushing me to make decisions, to take to make a good action instead of. I could feel that there was some things that were better than others, and that it was my choice to align myself to those better things instead of the less better things. And the more I was, greedy of those good things and going for those good things, the more I could feel satisfaction and peace and integrity in myself. And so I knew, as for the baby, that it is my good decisions which is going to make that reality grow in me. And it's exactly the same for the soul. I don't know where it's going to bring me. I don't know how the baby's going to be at the end. But what I know is that I can feel when it's correct, when it's good for me and good for the others. And it was exactly the same with the pregnancy. I could feel, and I trusted in that way of evolving, because I knew that somebody's taking care of that. I mustn't think about doing the feet, the hands, the head, the ears, the eyes. I would have forgotten something. So I really trusted the process. And it's exactly the same that I feel with the soul. I believe in it without even having much to do. Just as for the pregnancy, do my best to give the best. And that is exactly the same for the soul. Well, for me. And it's a reality that I can feel, because that is something very strong, and it pushes me to go to service, for example. That is that reality in me that pushes me. Without that reality, well, I would choose selfish, I would make selfish decisions. But that reality is so powerful, because it really attracts situations where it can grow even more, because that's the process. The soul wants to grow, and it only grows in service, and it only grows in decisions that go in the way that the Supreme wants me to go. So, but I've always got the free will to not to follow that. But it is really like that I can feel that reality growing. And one day somebody, we were in a study group, and somebody, it was a man, he said, I don't feel my soul. And there were a few women, and all of them said, we do. We do feel that soul in us. We do feel that reality in us. Is it easier for a woman because of the pregnancy process or not? Well, I'm happy to be a woman anyway, but I would like to hear some men about that experience. Well, thank you.
Well, I'm happy to be a man and feel it too. Well, thank you, Agnes. You know, I think you point out many good elements. Am I a good nurturer? Am I a good, how you call the people that take care of a garden? Am I taking good care of my inner garden? Do I have an inner life? Do I cultivate that inner life through worship, prayer, and service? You know, it's really interesting that we have 2,100 pages, 2,097 to be precise, talking about the will of the Father, and so many people are puzzled and say, what is the will of the Father? So, well, you just read a book which tells you what is the will of the Father from page 1 till the last one. Even the last sentence of the book tells you what is the will of the Father. And you know, the interesting thing about pregnancy, Agnes, is that sometimes we choose the right partner and sometimes we don't choose the right partner. We hope we choose the right partner, and it's true for the men and the women. How many of us are in a second or third relationship or a second marriage? And, you know, we wish we would have done the right decision right from the get-go, but, you know, we come into this life, we don't know much, and it's more trials and errors. But once we know better, we don't have the excuse that say, I don't know. No, you know now, so act accordingly. And when we study the revelation, well, we know something. The revelators are really smart. They expand our cosmic consciousness first, and then they help us deepen our spiritual perception. So it's interesting because many women say, oh, you're too intellectual. Well, the mind comes from your divine spirit. So it's given to us by the divine minister, by the infinite spirit. It's the feminine side of God that gives us that mind. And if you look at the mind as a cosmic wound, then it's changed the whole picture. The problem is that this mind is a perceiving, feeling, and thinking mechanism. Most of men just use the thinking element, and many women takes more the perceiving or feeling, but it's the three of them that needs to work in coordinate harmony within us to make that mind really a cosmic tool, and where we can create a fertile ground for first the birth of self-consciousness. There's many births we go through. You know, there's the birth of the embryo within the womb, and like Agnes say, you're not really aware of it until something starts to move and you feel different. And I don't know, I never experienced it, but I can imagine from what Agnes is telling me, and all of you that have babies. And then there's our actual biological birth. All of us come from a woman. We all went through that birth. Even Jesus, it says, in just the same manner as all the baby before that day and after that came into that world, the promised child was born. There was nothing different. He had to go through that experience just like us. So all of us that are here in this room right now have experienced that biological birth. And I'm sure all of us have experienced the birth of self-consciousness. You know, we have this, all of you that are grandparents have this opportunity now with better state of consciousness to relive in a certain way parenting. And we can see that birth of self-consciousness when the child realizes that he's not alone in the world, that there are other people around us. You know, in paper 16, section 8, it explains that self-consciousness consists in the intellectual awareness of our personality and includes the ability to recognize the reality of other personalities. Well, as good mother and good father, isn't that our task to help that child to recognize those things and not to make them like selfish brat or like the king or the little queen because you have only one kid, or, you know, you treat them like they need to be surrounded and up to a point where we're almost making decision for them. Well, they have to make their first moral decision. So should we help them to make that first moral decision? Absolutely. You know, when they're facing something or they've done something wrong, instead of grounding them, isn't that good to say, hey, did you see the consequence of your act? And to see that there's another way maybe of doing it and there might be another consequence. Do you want to share that to Agnes? Agnes is helping me this morning. We're doing it together would be a better way to say it. You want to give that example of helping to come to make moral decision.
Helping to make moral decision.
To helping a child to make a moral decision. With Anna, who's 4 years old, and I know Lynn has a little.
Yes. Well, so I'm a grandmother of 2 grandchildren and one to come in January. And what I understood about helping moral decision is that a child is always repeating the same reactions towards what's happening to him or her. And so if we don't open their minds a little bit and giving them choices and saying, well, that's what you've done, that was your behavior, look what came out of that, but you could have tried other things, such as, and giving him examples of other ways that he could react and behave in a certain situation. And that gives the possibility of choosing something else. Because telling a child off because he didn't have the correct behavior, but not opening his mind to other ways of reaction or behaving in such a situation, it is as if you go to a restaurant and you're always taking, it's an Italian food, and you're always taking spaghetti, and you think that there's only spaghetti in that restaurant. If you don't take the menu and say, well, you've got the opportunity of taking cannelloni, lasagna, and all that stuff, well, how can you choose? And the child is very, he hasn't got a lot of experience behind him, but we do. And so we can come with propositions and propose them. Well, what about this? What do you think about doing like that? You can try. And I've seen that with my granddaughter, especially with problems with her brother. Well, when I instead of telling her off because, for example, she cycles just too close to her brother and it makes him fall, and of course he cries, and then she knows that she could have avoided him, but she wanted to go very close. So instead of taking care of her and telling her off, well, I go to the victim, and the victim is the little brother, and taking care of him. And well, she doesn't understand. Why doesn't she tell me off? She takes care of my brother, because usually the parents tell her off, and then maybe they're going to take care. Well, of course, they're going to take care of the brother, but the first reaction is to tell the child off. But I remember in the book, Jesus saying that you have to separate and take care of the victim. So, well, I took care of the victim. And of course, she was very curious about that. And well, after I invited her to come closer, asked her to describe what had happened and what could she have done to avoid that situation. And so it's just being with the child and putting questions, waiting for some answers, and opening the mind. And that really, well, works. Well, for what I'm experiencing with my grandchildren.
Thank you. Well, let me show you what a few notes here, and then we can maybe do some Q&A. Again, those are notes. It's not inspired by the divine counselor that visit me overnight. It's just my humble reflection. But we just talked about the birth of the embryo. Agnes talked about that a little earlier. Then we talk about that about that birth of self-consciousness, you're alone in the world. And we can create a good environment to lead the child early to altruism instead of just selfishness. And then this is the puzzling one, because basically that's in this discourse on the soul. Jesus said the soul is not built on self-consciousness. It's built on moral self-consciousness. What is moral self-consciousness? What can we do to bring about that moral self-consciousness? And you know, many times we have a group with our friend from Senegal each Sunday night, and we talk extensively about morality or the lack of morality in this world. The whole idea is not to be negative, but to look at facts. And I know our American friends can see this element of lack of morality all around now, even having a president that is very low on morality. So good and wise parenting create proper environment for the child to make his moral choice, leading to more moral choice. Not only one moral choice, but repeatedly making the moral decision that is presented to them accordingly to events that are happening in his life and his or her life. And in many study groups that we have, we talk about morality and what is morality in the 21st century. And there is a book, I'm not trying to promote a book, but there's a Canadian psychologist that did a book called 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. This is just a summary of the book. But he basically has he talks about religion the way us students of the Revelation understand religion, meaning a personal experience. And he talks about that in a way that it is the way out of chaos, and that there's a subtle attraction for nihilism in in a teenager and young adult, because it's a way to de-responsibilize themselves from anything to do with society. So just taking, and not giving anything in return. And this guy now have millions of followers, and he's really doing a good job at bringing people to be responsible for their life, and understanding that they have unlimited potential if they really start to take responsibility for their life and stop blaming others. All of us know that when you blame others, you lose your power. You give your power to the people that you blame. The first step is to take responsibility for whatever is happening in your life. And from that place, even Jesus was saying, don't give your attention to those souls that are not willing to make any kind of effort. It's in paper 159 when he addressed the instructor. So there's the birth of morality, which Agnes gave an example, where us parents can lead the kids, or we can lead our child that will be parents, to help their kid to make moral choice and to live morally for whatever it means, especially in a world where morality is very low. And then there's the birth of the soul. And the birth of the soul is really just that first moral decision. But it's not being born of the spirit. It's not the same thing. So what's the difference between the birth of the soul and being born of the spirit? Well, we have a few quotes here that explain that briefly when Jesus answered to Nicodemus, verily, verily, I say to you, Nicodemus, except a man be born from above, he cannot see the kingdom of God. So if I'm a truth seeker and I want to live that truth, well, I'm going to say, how can I be born of the Spirit? What does it mean? What is my involvement? What should I do myself for that to happen? Well, we know that the Master, he was the master of a local universe, and he was always going by himself, praying, meditating, worshiping, and he was always in service. So I think we have right there element that show us the way to the kingdom of God. You know, as an example, Gaëtan, Lynn, and I, we live in Quebec, and this has been a Catholic bastion since it's been created. And at one point in the early 60s, people reject Catholicism. But at the same time, they reject God, they reject prayer, they reject worship, and they're confused. People don't know where to go, because this is part of what we are. We actually have everything to be spiritual beings. And you know, in the teaching of, when Rodin explained what he understands about the teaching of Jesus, that it's religion at its best, he explained that this gospel enables any truth seeker to find the true God and to seek him and to find him and to live him. But then he say, are we willing to pay the price? Oh, I didn't know there was a price to pay. Indeed, there is a price to pay. And are we willing to be born again, to be remade? And then he say, are we willing to go through that testing process of self-destruction and soul reconstruction? What is that self-destruction? Isn't that all these defense mechanisms that we keep alive because we have fear, because we have this, because we live something when we're 5 years old and we still keep it alive when we're 50? So once we accept to go through that process, we accept to be born again, to be remade, then we can experience other birth, a birth of cosmic morality. Isn't that interesting? We go through the birth of morality in order to attain moral self-consciousness so our soul can be born and go through that process of our soul gaining spiritual maturity, but then we can go through a cosmic birth. Isn't that what the revelation is offering to us? This is incredible. This is amazing that the revelators have given us everything. God always provides. God is the father of our soul. As a father, he always provides. Contrarily to a human father who are doing their best or not, the spiritual father never miss anything. He's always there for us. He has provided us of a fragment of himself to supply everything that is needed in our spiritual progression. So this is amazing that us, humble human being, can go through that cosmic birth of cosmic morality, which will lead us to the birth of cosmic consciousness, something that usually happens in the fifth dimension world. But if we read it, we'll see, hey, this is something that I can start to experience. You know, you become universe-minded. Isn't that what they explain in the first few parts of the book? To make us universe-minded, that we live in a how you say that, friendly universe that is administrated by wise personality, and that everything is there for our Avona ascent. Did all of us have become a voluntary student? Nobody push us to study the Urantia book. It's something that comes from within us. Not only we're willing to study it, but these moments are so precious to all of us. Are we involved unselfishly, naturally into service? If not, I think it's good to ask ourselves that question. What is in my life, or what is within me, that create an obstacle for that unselfish service? After all I've learned, can I not be a server of God and a server of my brothers and sisters? And then I know that my brother Bruce will really like this one. Are we spontaneous worshiper? When we see nature, we're in awe, we're grateful to God. I remember an example that my brother Gaetan told me when he was in the Grand Canyon, and said, what can I do now that I see all this? It's almost touching infinity and eternity with all that surrounding me. And he said, well, the best thing I can do is to offer it to God. So, in conclusion, and before we interact together, how many births you, me, us want to experience here on Urantia, right here, right now, in the everlasting now? All of us that have started on that journey, all of us have started our morontial life. Morontial life doesn't start in the dimension world. It starts right here, right now, if you're truly, sincerely involved in nurturing that soul and make it progress through worship, effective prayer, and service. Thank you. Okay. Well, I said answering question. I think it's more time to share than to do answer, question and answer, because if you do have a question, please ask it. But I'm not necessarily the one who will answer it, because there's a lot of wise individual in that room. And especially when it comes to the womb, I think the women in this room right now can really answer your question probably much better than I can. Okay, go ahead, Lynn.
I think that the analogy that Agnes took, it's really a good one. When we say that we are pregnant with God. Just think about this. And everybody is pregnant with God, really. When we want to do God's will and grow our soul, we are always pregnant with God. Because whatever will come out of it, it's going to be the growth of our soul. That's what I want to share.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. I feel, and through Anya's sharing, on that feeling of that enhancement and that growth and, actually being pregnant, that we experience that in all sorts of ways through the soul. Like when you were saying about the correct moral choice, Guy, isn't it every time we choose right, that's an enhancement for our soul? Every time we step outside ourselves and actually give love, even if it's just a hug to someone else, that's an enhancement of our soul. Any little act that we do in unselfishness for God, it enhances our souls. So, that happens from the beginning when we start at 6. The more we do, the more we know, feel, and perceive that it's the right thing to do for our soul. Like Anya said, it feels right when it's coming from the soul. So there's no escaping that feeling. In fact, it has us craving more and more. That when we pray and it touches us deeply, or when we read a passage in the Urantia book, we have that feeling from our soul, the depths of our soul. So while there is no greater thing in it, it makes me emotional just to share on it. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Gretchen. Well, I think, Rhonda, you're ready to jump in. Why don't you do so? I can see it in your eyes. You're on mute, though. I know we can feel your soul without the sound, but if you talk to us, that's even better.
Oh, that's sweet. My last course, you were so helpful in all your comments and discussion groups, and I really appreciate you for that. I grew from that, and that's why I do those courses. I grow every time, but that was just it was great, and I thank you for that. So that was a service that you did to me, and I appreciate that. I'm grateful. Well, I was just thinking about service. It doesn't have to be a big deal. You don't have to sign up for the biggest thing that's going on in town. It's all the life, like the ladies have said. It's just all those little small things that we do, and that is a service to God. We're kind of spreading that around by just our smiles and our hugs and our conversations and asking people about themselves. I mean, you go to the grocery store and you have a conversation with the checkout person. I mean, they hardly ever have conversation, I think, and they love to tell stories, and you hope it's not going to be too long because there's people behind you, but sometimes, they just want to tell me something, and I just want to listen to them, and I think that those are little things in life that are service to God and doing God's will, and I think it can just be simple little things, and every day, every time we go out, and I guess that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, this is really good. Thank you, Gretchen and Rhonda. You know, we see service, you know, I think in a way it's our ego tricking us, making the service so big. I cannot do it. I've heard story, you're gonna laugh about that because I'm sure you heard a version of that one wherever you live. Say, oh, I'm gonna win the lottery, I'm gonna create a center, and then I'll be able to serve God. I say, well, it will never happen. I wish you good luck, but it doesn't work this way. Serve God, and He will give you more service. If He sees that He can trust you, He will give you more each day. And as Gretchen said, this is the only addiction we're allowed to, addiction to service, because it's not an addiction, it's food. And you know, what's incredible is that some people, some of us are really involved in service, and other people come to us and say, oh my God, it's incredible what you do, and so many classes. And I say, no, you know what? I can do more. I know I can do more. And Agnes was sharing with me this week, she was watching a movie on a woman called Irene something, and she saved so many kids from the Holocaust. And the only thing she has to say after receiving all the praising, it's a little bit like Schindler's List. You know, at the end of the movie when he said, well, I see now that I could have saved so many more. And you know, I know that when we're going to get to the mansion world, we're going to say, oh my God, how much more I could have done.
That's true.
But you know, having that realization now is a powerful thing, because when you say that, God hears you and He put more service on your path. When you pray, you know, us in Quebec, we had a funny thing about prayer before. We say, okay, I'm going to pray for that person and then I'm okay. I pray for them, I'm okay. No, no, no. You pray for them, God will use you to go to them and to nurture them. Prayer is only a preparation for service. Effective prayer is a preparation for service, is to put you in a state of loving service for those people. Each morning after worship when I pray is to prepare myself for loving service. And for us, humble human being, we need to do it each day. We need to consecrate our choice each day, especially living on a planet like ours. But is there a better life than that? Whatever life you lived before, you know, I had a life of jet setter before, and people tell me sometimes, oh, you probably missed it. I say, are you kidding me? I don't miss it 1 second. I wouldn't change the life I have now for anything else. This is the best. The best life is to serve. Because anyway, like Gretchen said earlier, any one of us that have experienced true service makes us so happy. And this is an happiness that has nothing to do with wealth or with a good dinner, because those are human pleasure. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not that same level of joy. This is a divine fruit. You know, just before they say love is the desire to do good to others, have you noticed in the paragraph before they talk about the fruits of divinity? You know, they talk about the fruits of the Spirit of the beginning of the book, love, joy, you know, peace, long-suffering, goodness, etc. But then at the end, the Master said, if you don't show forth fruits of the Spirit, my Spirit of truth is not active in you. And then they talk about loving service, merciful ministry. But there are fruits of divinity as well. And one of them is spiritual joy. Another one is cosmic wisdom. you know, spiritual progress, intellectual peace, moral satisfaction. It's amazing. And that's really what this guy, Jordan Peterson, explained. It's amazing the potential we have. But are we sitting on it, or are we doing something with it? And by the way, it's Jordan Peterson. Someone asked me, you see the name here? Jordan Peterson. Dave, you want to say something? Is your name Dave? I think he's done. Yes. Ah. You know, Dave, it makes me think. You know, one day I was giving a speech, and a woman from France came to me at the end and said, "Oh, Mr. Perron, I would like to have your faith." I said, "Well, ask God. He's the one who gave it to you, not me." And what's interesting is that some of us have turned to God, like my brother Gaëtan, Agnès. Agnès want to be a nun when she was young, and Gaëtan want to be a missionary. And they were touched by God very early in their life. You know, good for them. But this life, this human life from the eternal perspective, is just a moment. It's in paper 112, section 5, if you don't believe me. That's what's written there. This life is just a moment. But in that moment, you can search God, you can find God, and you can even live God. So Dave, the fact that you just came to the Urantia book now, and it's your second reading, and you're finding a community that will support you in your quest, you know, brothers and sisters in spirit, it's good. It happened to me in my 40s, so it's never too late. And in the life we live on this planet, you bet it's never too late. My father is 97, and I'm still trying with him. Each time I see him, well, Dad, don't you think there's something after? I don't know. I try everything, make him read the book, even being a reader of the audio version. I see he's going to read it, and he's going to start to be interested in it. But, you know, I understand his background. He was really into that domination of the church at that time, and that's what he has rejected. But at the same time, he has rejected other things. And, well, God is merciful, so. And my mother has living faith, and he wants to see her again, so that's a beginning right there. Janet, you want to share something with us? We cannot hear you. Oh, she fused. Lucky her. Yes, Bruce.
I think Dave brings up something very important, and that is the importance of the group and the importance of learning within the context of the group. I think it's extremely important for us to be open to the notion that somebody who just picks up this book and reads it for the first time today might have something to teach this 40-year reader that may be profound and new and deeply meaningful. And I think that's why groups are so important, so vital to our spiritual development. That yes, this is a personal religious experience, this relationship that we have, this growth of our soul, but within the context of a larger group of people that are around us, there's so much that we can learn, especially in terms of service. We need that balance of perspective from other people. And what I find particularly important and very, very useful is that new reader like David, who's just sat down and has just begun to have some personal experiences with it. Because one of the things that we learn in education is that the real validity of teaching, beauty of teaching, is that it's a 360-degree proposition. The teacher instructs the student, but the student also instructs the teacher. And it is that 360-degree relationship that's really so beautiful. It means a lot to an old reader to listen to someone who has just started reading and just had their first impressions, because very often they will bring something to the table that I won't have even thought of in 40 years of reading. Mm. And so we are constantly refreshing each other, and that's why I think the group is so important.
Thank you, Bruce. You know, Monday, I'm at Gaëtan and Lynn right now, and they were away at the Parliament of World Religion. And I think our brother Gaëtan might want to share, and Lynn, some insight about that. And there was a study group here on Monday, so I was happy to be here in person and be part of it. And a young woman that followed 2 UBIS classes happened to live 35 minutes from here. She didn't know there were study group, a little bit like Dave. And I said, well, we have a study group. It was a short class on the thought adjuster that just ended on last Sunday. And I said, why don't you come to the study group? She said, oh yeah, I can come. I said, absolutely. Well, her in the study group, she was the light of the night. She was so happy and enthused. She's 35. She shared things about her understanding. It doesn't matter. None of us understand the book completely, and very far from that. But like Bruce shared, her enthusiasm was really contagious. And any of us who have been put in a, how can I say that? You know, in a place of being a teacher or facilitator or instructor or whatever, or workshop leader like Lynn and Yes and I do a lot of workshop. I think Rhonda does as well, and probably I know Bennett is doing some, and Bruce have done a lot of beautiful prayer to sustain the people at the Parliament of World Religion. So any of us that, you know, come up a little bit and share, we know how much we learn from others. You know, people ask, why do you do all that? I say, well, don't you think I gain something out of it? I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it to serve. But wow, when you serve others, God serves you. And, you know, I'm going to take the example of a UBIS class. Maybe Bennett want to share an example of the UUI class. But it is amazing. I'm right there in the middle of 15 truth seeker for 10 weeks. And I'm like the quarterback. I take the ball and I give it to the other. They give me back the ball, I give it to another. Through quotes, through questioning. I never answer something. If they ask me a question, I put a quote, because it's for them to discover. They have the truth within them. They have the answer within them. But if they ask clear question, they're going to have clear answer. The key is to have good question. But good question comes from a good mind. And that's why we talk about those different births. You know, like Agnes shared about the womb of a woman. If the woman knows she's pregnant, if she smokes, she's going to stop smoking. She's going to start maybe to eat better, if she's aware, obviously. But when we are aware that God works within our mind, isn't it to each of us to keep that mind working well, that the perceiving, the feeling, and the thinking part works well, and they work in harmony in order to receive all the insight, the intuition, the inspiration to go about nurturing that soul through, again, worship, effective prayer, and service? This is not complicated. As you said, Rhonda, earlier, there's nothing complicated. The ego is really complicated. He likes to make things complicated. So you stay in your comfort zone. You know, I had a friend, a woman friend that was sending me emails, and the signature, it was really good. Say, if you want to grow, you will never be in a comfort zone. So isn't that what they say in that quote, you know, where with God, nothing is impossible. We fathom on disappointment. We're happy with disappointment because we know we're going to grow. Well, I don't think that's the common ground here on this planet, but, you know, something happened 2 weeks ago, and it's okay. This is the way it happened. It just happened. Why react negatively to it? I'm just building the negativity on that event, and who knows it's negative. And in fact, I saw one day after that it was really positive that it was happening. So isn't that gaining more of that cosmic consciousness, that expansion of our understanding that what we see as an ordeal is not an ordeal at all, is just a learning experience that we might not have gone through if we would just have continued to do the same old thing each day. Hey, Mary Joel, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Can we see you? Are you in the hospital?
No, I just got out.
Nice.
Can we see you?
Something's wrong with the machine, but I don't look so good anyhow.
You look perfect anyway. Well, Mary Jo, do you want to share a little bit about your prison ministry?
Well,
first, let's start by saying she's a very young woman of 84 years old. And I just turned 65, and she's my role model, knowing that at 84, 85, I will still be serving like she does. Go ahead, Mary Jo.
I think today was very helpful for me, because sometimes, especially what happened to me is I had severe pneumonia, and being in a week in the hospital gave me a lot of negativism. And I think today really cleared my head a bit, that the last thing you said, it just happened. And that's what happened. It happened to me. And right now, I have this very, I took on too much is what it's called. But then again, how could have I taken on too much if I do my Father's will, and it came back, do it. And so I have 60 more parole men. I work with women. I now have 60 more men clients. And I just need to be able to have the strength and prayers to make sure that I get enough volunteers to work with them. I just I do have one man that's helping me with fundraising. So I'm just glad that I stayed in this today, because there's so many people who their souls are so sad. They're not growing, and they don't know why. And you know what I've told you before, what I tell them is that your soul is like a piggy bank, and it's called a soul bank. And every time you do some good stuff, even if you're in prison, you smile at somebody, or you are kind to somebody, that puts a coin in your soul bank. And even in prison, and actually more in prison, people in prison have more of an opportunity to be able to see God, because they have a little more time, and they're not out fighting the drugs and the problems of making a living, supposedly. But you can see that they want so much to be part of God. And I thank God that I can do what I can do. And of course, right now I'm not very strong, but I will get there. I will get there. And I thank everybody, and just pray for the wonderful men and women in prison. Some of them are really bad. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They have had horrible, horrible lives, and they've reacted to those horrible lives. But they want to change. That's the thing. They're not just saying that to me, because they don't have to say it, but they're writing me letters. They're telling me, please. Actually, they're saying, don't die.
Yeah, you can. You cannot die now. We still need you.
That's what they said.
And we've been all the one with you in the Inner Life class. I've been praying for you, and we're really happy.
God, thank you.
We're really happy that you're here with us right now. And in these classes, we had these experience, like a few people had some severe illness, and we've prayed for them. Bruce is one of them that we pray. He had a neck surgery. We pray for them, and he told us that he very much feels supported through this experience. So what a blessing to be able to pray together for a good purpose. Hold on, someone who's a Galaxy S5. Are you a visitor from another world and you want to share something with us? Bye, Janet. It was good to see you. You want to just say a little "I" before you go? She's on mute. You're on mute. Yes. And continue to be a beautiful light in Florida. Okay. Thank you for being with us, Janet. See you. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. I'm
Bye.
from Baltimore.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Alfonso Garcia.
Hello,
Uh,
Alfonso.
I was born in Mexico, but I live in Houston, Texas now, and I'm very happy to be here with you. And I was just thinking about what the example about the pregnancy. You know, as that embryo will need to feed. And he will get all the everything that is the body of that particular person is providing them. So the soul is the same thing. You have to feed him from above, from the food from above, that come from up high. And that's the same thing. It's what we have in our mind to feed our soul, and what we do with our, in our life that will be feeding the soul, And I just hear you saying something about uh, the divine or divinity fruit.
Yeah, the fruits of divinity. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the first time I heard that when you interact with others, and you offer them a kind word or a smile or a hug, that's the feeling that you had, that the joy that you experience in your soul. That's what you comes out of that act. And something that I always practice. I try to practice. It just comes out automatically when I approach let's say at the grocery store, at the restaurant, to anybody. I would always say, I always have a kind word or something to laugh about, a joke or something. But I like to be, shine. I want to brighten their life or the day that time and that particular moment. And that's something that I think I have learned to do. Um, Talking to people, and always saying something nice. I just had a phone call from a real estate lady, asking me if I wanted to buy properties or something. And then I noticed something in her voice, and I said, you got a beautiful voice, and that is something that people who you talk to would like to hear from a pleasant voice. So what I did was to highlight something nice, and she likes it. I say, hey, I never heard those words before in my life. I said, well, yeah, it's something, it just comes out automatically for me to say something. Because you feel it. I mean, because it's a, Bali, this lady, the way she talks is very pleasant, very, joyful. And I say, hey, keep up your good job. But I always find the opportunity to say something. And that's what you say, the divinity, something. I guess, I don't know how to express it. But I'm very happy to hear you today, and the rest of the brothers and sisters. And I know I'm very happy. Uh, like I said, I'm from Mexico, but I have lived in the United States for the last 45 years. And I used to have a study group, not no more. And I was involved too with prisoners correspondence. I was the liaison, the Spanish liaison for the group, the study group that we had here in Houston. And
Very good.
I mean, I wish you could read what those prisoners used to send me letters, and I just find them, like, golly, these people out there, they need our help. So I tried my best to provide them with a book, but it was a good experience for me to participate in that. I'm not too good about remember things, but I was involved with that when David Litcomb, I don't know, I think you know him, David Litcomb.
Yes, yes.
He was the one I used to read the book with 2 years ago, and I'm just happy to be here, and I'm very happy to hear. I learned a lot today from what you said about the birth of the soul, the birth of the moral conscience, and it's something that I try to apply to my work. Being conscious, being conscious of what we do, being conscious about what is that the company expect from us, and then you just said that being conscious is that you exist, but the others exist, and I try to apply that at work, trying to create conscious about what our job, what we do. We do it as a group, and it's just me doing one thing, you doing one thing. It all connects us. What we do connect all of us, And now it was very bad, but I was trying to create something, And I'm just very happy, I'll try to put a little my grain of happiness into others, and thank you for allowing me to the minutes that I used to talk.
Thank you, Alfonso. This is really a great analogy to plant seeds of happiness everywhere. And
if I can say, Maya Angelou would say, be a rainbow in someone's cloud. So this is what Alfonso is doing.
Thank you, Line. I always see you on my Facebook. I like when you.
Yeah, she's the queen of Urantia Facebook. Thank you. That's more ministry. Alfonso, and for all our Spanish friends, I learned Spanish a la Universidad de Montreal. Hablo en español un poquito. Alors, when I go down south for a couple of weeks, it kicks back in a little bit, but it's more like survival Spanish, obviously, because I don't practice it. And in the last 3-4 months, I really had that feeling from within that I should immerse myself in Spanish for a month and really get it back. And when you were speaking, Alfonso, and you say Mexico instead of Mexico, I say, well, here he is. You have planted the seed even deeper in me to do that immersion. So it's amazing how we rub on one another in ways that we don't know. How many times we say something to someone and 10 years later they come to us and they say, oh, what you told me that day, you don't even remember what you told them. And it says it changed my life or it changed something. So as Rhonda was saying earlier, there's no small or big ministry or small or good deeds. They're all good. Smiling at someone when he's depressed might be just a kick for them to get out of that depression. Or how many times we heard stories about someone that was about to commit suicide and something happened to them and it changed the course of their life. So, my friend Paul, the rich millionaire there from Chicago sitting in his living room. I'm just kidding. Well, he surely have a millionaire soul. Each time I go to Chicago, he's picking me up and I tell him, this is a great service, because each time I go to Chicago for the foundation meeting, I feel I'm coming home. And the one that makes me feel that way, it's him. So there is no little service. It's all good. Yes, Alfonso.
I'm actually participating with the Urantia, Latino Urantia from Miami. We do have a study groups on through the internet every Wednesday.
A Zoom.
that's the only way that I can participate in a study group through the internet from Miami. We got people from all different parts of the United States and I think South America and Mexico. But we got just from Mexico. But it was something very. This person that invited me to join the group, he actually came to my house while I was asking them about, because they were going to have a mini conference, and I was in through WhatsApp asking them when, and then this guy Ramon from Colombia, he was in my area in Houston. He says, "Hey Alfonso, where you live? I go to see you." And he came and he took the time to come to my house and talk to me, and he inspired me to go to assist to that conference. And words when someone sees something good in you, it attracts you. It make you feel like, hey, maybe they see something that I don't see myself. And so I went to that mini conference for the weekend. It's all I did, 2 days there, and come back to Houston. But I just feel very, very happy, to be there, because ever since my study group dissolved, I have no contact with anybody, only through the internet. And
well, it's good to be positive and say, well, I have the contact and I can build on that and have others. So, and nowadays with technology, there's no reason not to have contact. We have contact with people in Africa each week, and these are an incredible tool. And you just mentioned WhatsApp. I think Agnes and I are involved in a 10 WhatsApp group, with people from all over the world. So there's no reason. All the technology is there. And as Bruce mentioned earlier, and what Alfonso just reiterated, it's that union of soul is one of the key elements to the growth of our soul. So Bennett, Gaetan, and Pio, would you like to say something? Go ahead, Bennett.
Just to mention something, when I went to the conference in Montreal,
yes,
and I met Pio there. And
okay.
I came out with the story when we were with one of the conferences. And at the end of the conference, he came out and said, "Alfonso, I want to thank you because you said something that I like, and it really helped me, And those moments are the culmination of, I say, hey, it makes you feel like, oh my God, did I say something nice? I just tell him the story of my illness, and he, whatever I said, he likes it and enjoy it. And at the end of the conference, he come up, Alfonso, I want to thank you because you say something, nice, So, oh well, that's the frost on the cake, for me.
Yeah, it's great food. Great food for our soul.
Yeah. I remember Pio. He's a nice guy, very happy person. I like him. I wish I can see him again.
He's right here on the screen. All right, Thank you, Alfonso. Bennett, you were just about to start.
Yes, hi everybody. In this discussion, we talk about the will of God. I think when you first started, you referred to people, what is the will of God? And how can you read this book? How can you study this book for so long? And maybe we're not sure of that, or we don't remind ourselves often enough. And I am no different in that respect. When somebody says, be like God, behave like God, how do you do that? I don't know that there's a formula, but the more you know God, the more you spend a little bit of time with God each day, there's something there that you can then use to share with people. And, you know, again, the fruits of the Spirit. Well, you can give us a couple different lists that are in the Urantia book that describe the fruits of the Spirit, or you can understand that the fruits of the Spirit is the result of your relationship with God. Well, who's God? God's the tree of life. God is the true vine, and we're all part of that. We're all branches on that vine. As long as we're plugged into that, then we are directly connected. And the fruit of that relationship, in other words, the gifts that God gives to us individually, then provides, we don't turn around and if God gives me this, I turn around and the next person I meet, I give what God just gave me. That doesn't accomplish anything. I have to internalize that. I have to make it part of my life. I have to learn what there is to learn from it. And then the fruits of that relationship is what I share with all the people that I can, or where it's appropriate. And Guy, I really liked, as a few have said about the discussion of birth or being pregnant with these ideals. So soul consciousness, our soul is in there and our soul is growing. Why? Because every time we make a good moral decision, a right moral decision, we experience a new divine invasion of the soul. What was the first divine invasion of our soul? It was the birth of our soul when the adjuster came at our first moral thought. And yet what the book tells us, and it only really says this one time that I recall, every moral decision is a new divine invasion of the soul. Now, are we going to be particularly conscious of that? Probably not. We may remember what it did for us at some point, but the real process there is that as we receive because we give. It doesn't happen necessarily the other way around. Each time we share what we have, more comes. And it is the well of eternal life, of everlasting life. So we share the inner life with God, we share the outer life with our friends. Sometimes people confuse that, but I'll leave that thought hanging. What's most important in this whole process is that as the physical being is the seat of our material life, the growing soul is the seat and the substance of our Urantia life. The body dies, but the soul is what lives on. And so from that first thought, when we're 4 or 5 or 6 years old, that the adjuster comes, we're building that future life. Now, are we especially conscious of that? I don't think so, not very often. We're aware of our failures. We're aware of our inadequacies. We're aware of things that are the least important part of what we're doing. For most all of us, if we could see our life and the future of our life the way the adjuster sees it, we would stop hassling ourselves about these little insignificant things that we think are the sum and substance, when in fact, the adjuster sees us as the child of God, the growing child of God with an eternal future. And while we may not want to gloat about that or be so proud of that in a material way, there's nothing wrong with giving ourselves a break and realizing that if we are truly doing these things that we're all discussing today, if we're really doing those things, then we need to allow the reality of that to be a big part of our self-image. Yeah, we need to correct the things that are wrong. We need to correct the things that are wrong in our life. But when we're focused in the outer world, we see what the outer world is. When we're focused in the inner world, we get to see through a higher vision to what the outer world can be. And we can't do one or the other, but we usually do the lesser one. And I'll encourage everybody to do the greater one, which is to do the inner life first and then project that, the fruits of the Spirit. And that's our relationship with the Supreme. I love that quote you put up early on, Guy, about our cosmic morality is the fulfillment of our obligation to the Supreme. Thanks.
Thanks. You know, really the life of our soul is truly a movement from inside out. I remember I was going to a presentation we were doing in Toronto quite a few years ago, and a woman picked me up, and we were driving to the event, and it stayed with me up to now. She was driving, and she was repeating, from inside out, from inside out, from inside out. I think she repeated like 15 times and say, okay, I think you're getting it. It's from inside out. It's truly in worship that we feel all these things, and then it leads us to effective prayer and then into service. So thank you, Bennett, for sharing all that. Gaetan, you want to share something? Go ahead.
You hear me well?
Yes.
Well, everything was said about the soul. Everyone has a perception of what the soul is from their reading of the Urantia book, and probably everyone have at one time or another meditated on the concept of the soul, or maybe tried to feel the soul itself within them. And I guess there's a reason why we don't actually feel it all the time. Probably we would get disturbed by having that feeling of disunity, because when you start feeling something apart, usually when we feel some things, because it's not always part of us, it's a little bit a part of us, so we can feel it. But still we can feel its manifestation in our mind. Like Agnes said, when we're moved toward good, we're moved toward service, I guess it comes from the soul. And the more that we listen to that voice that tells us to serve, to help others, the more we let the soul express itself. And the more we are doing the will of God, because how can we know what is the will of God? And there's certain way that we must know. And they're so untangible, they're so quiet in ourselves that we don't exactly discern them as, oh, there's the will of God, But when I remember and I will repeat this, what I said at the Parliament of World Religion, while I was researching exactly what the will of God is, I remember what Jesus said about it. And for him was the search for the full expression of the three values of divinity: truth, goodness, and beauty. So when we try to express in our life, in our decision, beauty, truth, and goodness, then we're trying to manifest the full divinity within us, which reflects, I believe, the will of God. God wants us to be like him. How to be like him? Well, to reflect those three values within ourselves. But then I was listening to Bennett, and sometimes concept help us understand what happens when we manifest that will. What happens to our soul? How does it manifest itself? We can observe those manifestations intellectually by witnessing how we are, or mostly sometimes how other people are. Like the fruit of the Spirit. Bennett mentioned the tree of life. God is the tree of life. And then I start thinking about the tree of life. Then I start thinking about the real tree. And like you say, Guy, many times, as below as above, And God's manifestation in nature is what he is everywhere. The laws of nature reflect the spiritual law on high. So when we watch a tree and we watch leaves, like here in Quebec, when we see all those leaves at the when fall comes in, they start falling off. But sometimes there are leaves that fall off in the middle of the summer. And I was wondering sometimes, why are these leaves falling off in the middle of summer? They're not finished their role as leaves. And then as we understand, like the fruit of the Spirit, those leaves that fall off have taken nourishment from the tree, but they have not given back to the tree the photosynthesis, the process of photosynthesis, which give back to the tree whatever the tree needs, and produce oxygen for all other creature to enjoy, it took from the sun, it took from the earth everything, and then didn't give back. And then because it didn't not give back, it just fell off. The tree got rid of it. And I like this example. And when Bennett mentioned it, that concept became more clearer in my mind. And then it reflected also what Jesus says, I am the water of life, I'm the life and he is the water of life. It's like what flows in the tree, and when we're connected to God, that water of life flows through us. And then we manifest his fruit. And then when we don't manifest those fruit, well, the soul doesn't grow.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can fall off from that tree. And many people, I guess, are in that situation where they don't exactly manifest those fruit. But I'm not there to judge them. It's up to them to do that. But to make that connection with God. And I remember, like you mentioned, for me, very young, I was touched because I wanted to be a missionary. And from way back, as far as I can remember, I always had that dialogue with God in my mind. And later on in my mind, it took a new expression, like it was most like Father. I would call him Father all the time. And driving, I would talk to him in my mind. And at one time, I came conscious of it, and I said, geez, he must be tired of hearing me babbling all the time, And that's for me was part of sharing my inner life with him. And I guess we all have different ways of sharing that inner life with God. And we're unified in the fact that we want to unify ourselves with God, but we use all kinds of different means to do it. We're very diverse, and when we share this diversity with others, we help others understand how this process works with them. And then sometimes they discover new ways of connecting with God, or they already were doing that, they were not aware of it. And the more we do it, the more the soul grows, the more we experience God, the more we become conscious of him, and the more we want to love others and be in service to others. So that's what I think. Thank you.
Great thoughts and great action. Thank you, Gaëtan. Bruce, hold on just 1 second. Paul, do you want to say something before we get up, or Pio? And John, I want to know, is it John Gelling who's part of our Inner Life class? She might get off mute. Okay. If you want to talk, you need to click on your microphone. Yes. You're another Joanne. Okay, good. You want to say hi to us? Ah, we know that place. Yeah. Yeah, we know Kathy and Mark and Jeff and a few of you that are. Yeah, yes. Ah, okay, well, a big hug and a big kiss to all of them. Okay, thanks, Joanne. Bye, Bennett. He left us. Paul, do you want to say something?
Thank you. This has been a great experience. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. After listening to everybody, I think everybody here is manifesting some way of their personal preferences of showing or growing their soul. My way is, I guess, trying to live. What I haven't heard is living in the now from this group, and I feel like that's a very important way of living your life right now. Jesus, as he passed by, would always be of good cheer, fear not, all these little statements that give you the attitude of living in the now and helping your brothers and sisters in their life journey. So that also, for me, bears upon creativity. When you are trying to create something, you're looking inside yourself, and you are very close to whatever is there that helps you manifest creativity. And everybody lives creative lives. You can't read the Urantia book and not be living a creative life. You can't read the Urantia book without looking inside yourself while you're reading and being inspired by the words that's on the page. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. There was really interesting teaching from a guy named Eckhart Tolle on the power of now. And he did another book after that called New Earth. But again, in one page in the Urantia book, or maybe a page and a half, or 2 pages, in Time and Eternity in paper 118, it's amazing what they talk to us about the everlasting now, the continuous perpetuity. And if you haven't studied that yet, I encourage you to do so, because as Paul just mentioned, God is in the now. He's not in the future and he's not in the past. He's right here, right now, always. And the best way to be with him is to be in the now ourselves and let go of our anxiety connected to the future and the burden of the past, and just appreciate what's happening here in the now. Pio, you want to share something? And Jeannie and Gretchen, and then we're going to say goodbye with a prayer.
I'll let Jeannie go first. I'll let ladies first.
No, go ahead. You know, Jeannie has shown us throughout this meeting that the Divine Mother can be everywhere at the same time. Did you see how she can move from one screen to the other? It's pretty amazing. You women are gifted. Go ahead, Pio.
Well, when I saw Jeannie's Facebook last night, I guess it woke up my soul to join you at 8 o'clock in the morning. Especially, I totally enjoy, Guy, your presentation. And you started off with the womb, the birth. I'm going through a birth cycle right now with my little puppy.
Ah, okay.
And the reason why I brought up the puppy is because my little Lucy, this is a puppy, it's just amazing, her sense of duty. She was always a loving girl and always, into my arms, but every time I hold her, she's looking at her baby, and every time I weigh the puppy, she's all concerned, and the total responsibility of an animal is just amazing to me. So you can imagine they only have 5, adjutant spirits, whereas we have 7. It's just amazing, the nature of the wonder. Every time I see the puppy grow, the wonder of birth, and the sense of responsibility. If an animal had that sense of responsibility and love, how much more God would expect from us. And I thought it was very apropos for you to bring up Agnes on her sense of birth and her ministry with the prison and all that. And in regards to soul, from what I gather from all of your wonderful group, soul is a medium. Without our soul, we cannot go to Havana. I mean, God doesn't expect to bring us physically up there. Soul is the content that the angel, our transporting angels, will envelop us with our personality, and that is the one that goes up there. Our body leaves here. And so I understand the importance of the soul now, and I took some various notes, and I'd like to share again what what came to my mind was, you give power to persons you blame is very apropos. Don't wait for the lotto to serve God. I can do more. Prayer is to prepare you for service. Ego is complicated. It always interferes with that desire to serve. If you want to grow, don't live in the comfort zone. And give to receive, which is the leaf analogy of Jatan. I thought that was a very good analogy there, Jatan. And God is in the now. So those are the ones that I'm taking away this morning with my notes as I was listening. And yesterday, as I was going to sleep, I saw a little documentary called Tricky Dick and the Man in Black. It was about Johnny Cash, one of my favorite country and western singer, who was asked by Nixon to come play at the White House, and he demanded that he sing a very conservative redneck song called I'm an Okie from Muskogee, because of their Southern strategy, because that was at the height of the Vietnam War, which I experienced. But what Johnny Cash did was he grew up very Bible reading, and he was always praying, and he grew up from a Bible background. But he refused to sing that, and he sang a poem that he composed when he went to do a show for our troops in Vietnam. And he closed the concert, instead of singing Okie from Muskogee, What is Truth? And so you don't have to be a reader, but there are many people, and I was very impressed with Johnny Cash's courage to refuse the President of the United States and sing the truth of what is truth. Mm-hmm. And he questioned the war. So, God works in many ways, and we are very privileged because we are talking cosmology here, the enlightenment. But, it'll take a Buddhist monk a lifetime in a cave meditating to achieve some kind of enlightenment. But here we have the book. It's all written in, black and white. And we are very privileged to achieve this so-called enlightenment through logic, through compassion, through prayer, and through a social interaction like this. And I feel very fortunate. And thank you, Jeannie, for announcing it at the Facebook last night. And Guy, as always, you are wonderful. And I got to meet a lot more people, and especially my favorite fellow pilgrim, Rhonda, who sent me a beautiful yarmulke. Thank you.
Thank you, Pio. Thank you. I think your analogy with the puppy was amazing, because at one point in one of the UBIS class, someone said, why do we love our pets so much? And that answer was so full of wisdom. He said, animals behave perfectly the way they were created for. And I think you just give us another example of that. And thank you for another great insight that will help us on our journey. Agnes want to share something with us before she leaves for a family dinner. Go ahead, Agnes.
Yes, I'm going to leave, but I was listening to all those sharings, and I wanted to add a compliment to what I was saying before with the analogy of pregnancy, is that as soon as the embryo is alive, it's in touch with the mother by the umbilical cord, which is feeding the embryo. And it's exactly the same with us. It is important, and it is said in the book, that we have to constantly be in contact with the spiritual forces. And for me, it is the shift that I make. Service is outside, but the inside life, it is to it is that umbilical cord which is constantly nourished by the fact that I'm turning to God, and that God is able to nourish me. So for me, it was important to add that because there's a bond between God and me, and it is because I turn to Him that cord is the channel, I don't know how we say the canal, but through which God feeds me, nourishes me, and nourishes the others. So I would like to thank you all for this beautiful meeting, and God bless you all. See you soon.
Hold on, I think Jeannie want to say thank you before you leave, and thank you, God, for such a beautiful partner. And yes, okay, go ahead, Jeannie. And take good care of your pregnancy. Hey, Rhonda, can I talk to you after the meeting?
Well, I have one thing to share, and
Okay, go ahead. Bye, Agnes. Have a good dinner.
it was something that Gaetan said, and I think there is a formula for the soul. I think there's a formula, and I think it's different for each person. But I found this quote in a Spiritual Vitamin a couple weeks ago, and I shared it on in class. But it is true, and it's for our souls. And he was right on when he said it. He said, "It's from John Wesley." He said, "Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can." So I thought it was awesome.
Wow, that's beautiful. Can you share it in our WhatsApp group?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Sharon. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It was awesome. Everybody's sharings.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, bye.